In this video I will show how the semantic web standard SHACL can be used to build, dynamically adjust and to validate forms. To sketch out the idea, I'm using a tool we're building at Förderfunke called SemOps. I made an intro video about that one, but in short it's meant to enable fast and playful prototyping in the linked data space and to build demonstrators like this one. This is the first of 3 videos. I'll talk at the end of this one about what the other 2 are about if you're still interested at that point. Okay, so here we have a simple made-up example form that is waiting to be filled out by a citizen. Let's look at the data that went into it to build it. Most importantly, this is the requirement profile as a SHACL file. It describes in human and machine readable way the requirements that someone must fulfill to be eligible for child allowance in this case. Here we have some metadata about this requirement profile. Then the person has to live in Augsburg, and it has to have at least one child that is following the child shape, which says can maximum be 25 years old. It also contains the formula for calculating the amount that you are eligible to. Okay, then the second ingredient is the knowledge base. It contains the definitions of the data fields that are being used in the requirement profile. This is something that could also be a large repository of definitions, and it could also very well be built into a full ontology. So here we see things like age has to be of type integer and it has to be 0 or more. I used the friend of a friend vocabulary here and added a link to the respective Wikidata entity that is about age of a person. When it comes to the residence, I also added a FIM ID of the field that's closest to it. Let's just have a quick look. Build the URL for this. It was version 1.0, right? Yeah, and then we're here with the Wohnort. Or also we can check out the Wikidata one, and then it was this was the identifier, age of a person. Yeah, exactly. Okay. Because this is basically the beauty of linked data, right? The more we reuse existing vocabularies, the more interoperable it gets. And this data modeling example here is definitely room for improvements in this regard. It's still a lot of stuff is happening in our own namespace. Förderfunke that we just made up basically. Citizenship, for instance, can have exactly one of 3 values that are further defined down here as answer options. The requirement profile then specifies exactly what we need for this one. Down here we have another inference rule that adds the federal state. So if we know someone's city, we can from that derive the state. And the table of constants to facilitate this mapping is down here. Okay, and finally the third ingredient is the profile data we have about the user. In this case, we know nothing, just the basic triple of that person is of type citizen, but it could also be already pre-filled with some data. And these 3 things together basically render this form. How that happens exactly, or a bit of the dynamics in the background, we will look at in the third video. I also wanted to point out that the internal state of this form component is managed by a triple store. Okay, let's start filling this out. For the citizenship, we have these 3 options. Let's say we live in Leipzig. Now the inference kicked in, right? And we can derive Saxony automatically. Over here we can see how the profile takes shape. These are the triples making up the user profile. Now let's just see what's going to happen if I submit it now. We get some errors because, why is that? yeah, we're expected to have the value Augsburg here. Okay, let's change that. What we can also do is turn on that subject-specific constraints are already being evaluated. Right now it lets us type what we want, right? But if we turn this on, it constantly checks against the requirement profile. Instead of just checking when we submit, it would check all the time. Okay, it expects German here. Okay, let's add a child. And this child is -5, which is not okay. So now the general data field definition kicked in, that a child cannot have an age smaller than 0. This is not the definition coming from the requirement profile. So this form has basically a mix of these two things, right? The so-called plausibility check, that an age cannot be negative, and the subject-specific requirements that the child has to be below 25, for instance, in this case. Okay, and we can see here the calculation of the Kinderzuschlag amount. If we add a second child, we can see how that amount doubles. Also, I included these SH order commands. Let's say we want to swap the order of citizenship and residence. We should see that now the citizenship is moving upwards. So the form is being constructed by this input data. Okay, let's conclude by looking at the advantages. As we've seen, we can do both types of validation, the plausibility, no negative age, as well as the subject specific. For Kinderzuschlag, the child needs to be below 25 years old. We can facilitate dynamic form changes. As we've seen, based on input, when I add a child, the form changes, new input is being asked, but also inference. So if I add Augsburg, it can derive Bavaria automatically. We've also seen that UI components can be directly generated from the constraints, like with citizenship and these 3 drop-down options. Because we're in that linked data space, interoperability is a given. The more vocabularies we reuse, the easier it is to reuse it. And there's an active ecosystem in the space. In particular, the SHACL specification. This year, the Data Shapes Working Group will push forward this standard with some interesting things that might also improve this kind of setup here even further, with inference rules directly in SHACL and some things for formulas. And yeah, vocabularies are being developed around the world, around Europe, that could make sense to reuse here, and the tooling is being developed further. One sort of meta note in the end, of course, the best thing would be if laws would be directly annotated with constraints. This is how it could look like for Kinderzuschlag, and then not married, below 25, and this is how it would look like as a SHACL shape, max 25, and cannot have one of these 2 marital status. And why not annotate the law directly with this? It would be immediately machine readable. Would be amazing. Yeah, in video number 2, we look at this quiz approach of Förderfunke with 1 question at a time. And furthermore, I'm showing a sketch of a tool that helps anyone to create these SHACL shapes without having to know SHACL. All right, thank you. See you maybe in the next video.